So welcome back to Yerushalmi Maasrot. We are Perek Hamishi Halacha Aleph, which is roughly Daf Lamed Chesed Aleph. Now, so you're uprooting sort of saplings, soft trees, miterch shalai, from your field. V'noteah, in order to plant them l'terch shalai into another place in your field, they should continue growing and improving. Patur, you do not have to take maaser before you replant them. Even though usually you shouldn't sow tebel, by planting these saplings there's no isur, because they're not yet reached a stage of gemar malacha, right? They're not fully evolved yet, fully ripened. You can eat it achilas arai. Okay? Now the idea of forbidding you to sow produce before you separate trumas and maasros, in zonas atebel, that's only chal, it's not chal on these young plants, okay? Because they've not reached their gemar malacha, they've not reached their proper growth. Okay, and it's also only if you're planting it in your own field. You can't start giving them to someone else to plant them, when they're tevel. Okay, because mekach is kaver l'maseh. Let's carry on. Lokach b'mechuba l'karka. If you acquired fruit when they're still connected to the ground, potter, the person who buys it does not have to take maseh, and he can eat from it arai, because a transaction, a mekach, of something which is still connected to the ground, is not kaver l'maseh. Lakat, if you picked these saplings from your own, l'shaleach lachaver, to send as a gift to your friend, that he's going to plant them in his field, potter, the receiver is exempt from taking maseh before he plants them, because again, they've not reached their gemar malacha, they've not reached their fully ripened stage. Okay? All right. Rabbi Lezman Azariah, he said, if there are similar saplings that you sent to your friends that nimkoid b'shuk, that are already being sold in the market for eating, then harei elu, then these ones you've sent to your friend chayovin, you do have to separate maaser before you go and replant them, because they are considered gemar malacha. Gemar malachtam they've reached, therefore you do have to separate maaser.
Oh, because you could all plant them.
They're considered complete. Yeah.
Because you could all plant them.
Yeah. Okay. Now mekach is kaver, as we said, something which is gemar malacha. Mekach b'mechuba is still connected to the ground. It shouldn't be kaver l'maseh. So it could be our Mishnah is according to the view of Reb Meir. He holds mekach usually is kaver l'maseh, even something which is not complete. So the Mishnah says when you're buying something that's still connected to the ground, you're parted from taking maseh, because mekach b'mechuba is definitely not kaver. Okay. I don't know if that window's open up there. It is, isn't it? Yeah. After we said that you're allowed to plant these saplings without taking maseh, we bring a situation where you are chayav to separate maseh before you go and replant them. See, if you uproot your turnips, whatever it is, your radishes from your field, B'noteah, in order to plant them l'terch shalai, to somewhere else in your field, lezera, either in order to grow them for seeds, but not that they should themselves improve, but more for seeds, then chayav, then you do have to separate maaser before you go and replant them. B'nei shehu ganon, because uprooting them is considered their gemar malacha, which requires maasros to be taken, because the seeds that now they're going to grow are not chayav maaser. What? Sorry?
One at a time?
Whatever. It's the idea is the growth aspect. Here, you're uprooting these lefers, whatever the turnips, whatever it is, and the intention is to sow them for seed, not that they should improve. You're doing it for seed. So in such a case, you have to take maaser, because the uprooting is their go, and that is their gemar malacha, because the seeds that are going to grow are not chayav maasros, as we'll see in halacha gimel. So the seeds are not chayav maaser, and therefore it is a gemar malacha of the first ones which you're uprooting in order to sow. We will see exactly. Basically, they become ruined for eating when you sow them for seeds, and then there's no chayav maasros. And whatever seeds that grow, they're not fitting for eating. They're not chayav maasros. There's no other goren that's going to ever obligate them in maasros. So by you uprooting now, That is the goren, that is the Gemar Malacha, and you cannot go and replant them without taking Maaseh first. Betzalim. Now we're talking about Betzalim Sheshrishu Ba'aliyah. You have sort of onions which are detached, which are rooted in your attic. I don't know, a bit of earth that was on the floor. Taharu Milatame. If they were Tameh, they are now Tahar. Now even though it's not the way of their growth, but as far as other halachas, they're not considered planting. But in Nafla Alein, Mapoles, if earth fell on these onions and it covered them properly and they rooted, Behain Megulin, and their leaves remain uncovered, because that's the way they grow. Hare'elu Kinetuin Besada. These onions are like planted in the field for every aspect, and not just as far as Tumah is concerned. So basically, whatever grows there is Chaim Maasrot. But it's a Shemitah year, it's the Isra of Svichim. So it's like properly growing in the ground. If it's rooted and the earth has sort of covered it over, then they're like growing in the ground. Right, the first case of Potter Maasrot, because the leaves, you don't really want that rooting. If you want the rooting, then they're Chaim Maasrot. Right? The second case, where the earth falls on them, there's no difference whether you wanted the rooting or not. They're growing the way of sowing, and they have a din like they're planted in the field.
I was on the assumption that a pot plant that doesn't have holes.
It's only Rabbanan.
Is the Rabbanan.
But here, this is in earth.
It's in earth.
I know, but this is in its place of growth.
It's in the third floor of the attic.
This is in its place of growth, even though it's with the earth. I suppose the attic is connected to the ground somehow. I don't know. A pot plant, you're right. The Yerushalmi's got different views, by the way, about pot plants. Actually, remember in Bavli you've got machlokes about with a hole, without a hole. He says here, the fact that the Mishnah obligates these onions with Maasrot, the Rosh proves that if you plant on a roof full of earth, you're Chayav Maasrot. Elsewhere in Yerushalmi, Aseh to Aseh, we are Mamait Maasrot Zriya sowing in the house, but the roof is not considered a house. Even though the floor of it and the airspace are mastic between the ground and the seeds, and you might have thought it's like an artist she'ena nakuv, a flower pot without a hole. But since the roof is kavua and fixed to the ground, it's like ground. And also people sow there, and that's Pascha de Shulchan Aruch and Yerodea. According to the God, the idea of earth falling in is not talking about the onions there. It's talking about onions which are in a field. If earth falls on the onions in the field, they are like in the field and they're Chayav Maasrot. If that's the case, there's no right from our Mishnah to the Chayav Maasrot when it's on the roof. Okay. So you uproot these young saplings to plant them within your field. You don't have to take Maaseh before you replant it. We learned in the Brisa you mustn't sow tevel, right? And the time the Mishnah allows you to go and replant these things without taking Maaseh, he must hold that was only maybe with fruits which has already reached Gemar Malacha. And he allows you to plant these saplings because they've not reached Gemar Malacha. You want it to carry on and grow and improve. Now, who is the Tana who learned our Mishnah that limits the issue of sowing tebal only for fruit which is complete? Rabbi Hashem Shemen Lakish. Our Mishnah is based on the view of Rabbi Akiva. The Tanin and Taman, we learned in Peah. Noitel min hagoren v'zareah. You can take, let's say, a bit of the produce from the goren and sow it with potter min ha-maasrot. You have to separate maasrot from mareach. Till you stack it up. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. So according to Rabbi Akiva, the issue to sow tebal is only fruit that Gemar Malacha. And before Gemar Malacha, right, although it's not rooted, you're not separating Trumas and Maasrot, nevertheless, he holds, so actually in Talav Mishnah, he allows you to plant these things without separating Trumas and Maasrot, right? The Chachamim argue in Rabbi Akiva, they say you mustn't sow Tevel even before Miruach. So they would argue in our Mishnah, and they hold you mustn't plant these things without separating Trumas and Maasrot, even though you've not yet had a Gemar Malacha on it. Our Mishnah is mashma. He says here, the Lashon, this idea, some say the issue of sowing tevel, some say the issue is a tevel also bahana. You can't get benefit from its destruction, right? And that is based on the Brisa. You mustn't light shemen tameh of tevel, and it's hana shel kilo. It's hana even though it's getting destroyed. Right. Agmar's mashma is only a drabanan din. Isuri hana, where there's a problem of something being destroyed and getting benefit, according to many, is a Torah din. Alright. If sowing tebel is because it's hana shel killer, you're getting benefit while it's being destroyed, it should be asim in Torah. Okay, discussion on that. Let's carry on. Rav Chia b'shem Rav Yochanan divra kolhi. He says no, our Mishnah is going to everyone, even according to the Chachamim who say you can't sow tebel even before meruach. But Moedim Chachamim, Rabbi Kiva b'Shesadim, they agree with these saplings. You can plant them without taking masa. If you're going to ask me, ma ben chitin, ma ben shesadim, what's the difference between wheat and these saplings? Why do they forbid you to sow the wheat without taking masa? And these saplings they allow you. The difference is chitin, wheat, when it's cut, gemar malach is already complete. Even though you're not yet been Chaim Maasrot yet. Whereas shesadim, these young plants, usually they go and plant them again. They should grow a bit more. Einon gemar malacha, they've not reached their gemar malacha at all. Okay, we said if you uproot the turnips and so on from your field and you plant them again for the seed, then you have to take masa before you replant them. And this is also going to everyone. But they agree with planting turnips that for zera that you have to take masa before you plant them. Because they get ruined after you plant them in the ground. Right? They stay in the ground, the roots get hard, they're not ready for eating anymore. So you have to take masa before you replant them, not to remove the chiyuv maasros. But wheat also gets ruined. Even wheat kernels also get ruined by sowing them. They rot in the ground, and yet Rabbi Kiva allows you to sow them with tebel. So he says chitin with the wheat, although they get ruined, but yesh len go nachares. They're going to produce new wheat, which will have a goren in due course. So the sowing now is not removing completely the chiyuv maasros. But these lefes, the turnips and the radishes, ein lahem goren achares, they're not going to have another goren at all. The seeds are not going to be fitting to eat. There's not going to be any chiyuv maasros. So the planting removes completely the chiyuv maasros from these things. Therefore, Kiva agrees you cannot plant it without separating choros and maasros first. Lakat, if you uprooted these plant saplings, l'shaleach l'chaber, to send to your friends that he should plant them in his field, potter, the receiver does not have to take masa. Now it sounds like the receiver is potter whether he wants to plant it or he wants to eat it. So the Gemara says, well, Rav Amar, he says, who asa leichal? The receiver can't eat without taking masa, and the patur is only for the planting. But no, he's not allowed to eat it. He doesn't have to take masa, but he's still not allowed to just eat it if he wants. Now, these things have never reached their gemar malacha. There's no reason why you can't eat it. So Rav Shammai Hamakum Rav Yosef Rav Acha. The difference is like this. Ma'adam Rav, when Rav said you cannot eat the thing without taking masa, he's talking about a case. You put it in a guarded courtyard, and the Talmud Mishnah holds that a guarded courtyard is kaver lamasa, even though it's not complete. So Rav didn't intend to say our Mishnah forbids you eating them when it's tevel in every situation. What he meant was, if you bring it into a guarded courtyard, then the Mishnah forbids you to eat it, even though it's not yet complete. And Rav's din was said out of something that our Mishnah is the view of Rav Meir, and Amra Mada Masnisa Amra Kain. From our Mishnah we can see this, that the Mishnah he holds like Rav Meir, because we learn Lakach, if you acquire fruit when they're connected to the ground, Potter, you don't have to take Maaseh. Right? Mekach b'mechuba is not Kaver Maaseh. Fruit connected to the ground are not Gemar Malacha yet. And our Mishnah is telling you that Mekach is not Kaver, but it wouldn't need to tell you. Mishnah, why does Mishnah tell you Mekach is not Kaver? Is mashma habatalosh, if it was detached, then Chaim, then he would have to take Maaseh. Man is, who is the Tanu who holds that Mekach Tovel, that Mekach is Kaver Lamasa, even Beper Shalodik Ramalachton, fruit which is not complete. Lo Remer, is it not Remer? So you see, our Mishnah holds in this din like the view of Remer. Right? So if you bring them into a courtyard, even though Lodik Ramalachton, you can't eat it until you take Masa. According to Remer's Shitta, the Mishnah has to tell you Mechuba is part of Masa. He says the Bavli Pascha is Mekach Kaver Lamasa, only something which is complete. And based on the Bavli, the Rambam Paschas, A mekach is kaveh masa only if it's complete. Agmar is mashma. Start mission is remeah. But the other gears is maybe the rest. We're going to try and fit the gears in. So Amish is taking this only remeah. But the Babli is passing that mekach is kaveh masa only if the item is complete. Okay. Reb Chia. And we said, Rav Azariah said, if there are other plants similar which are sold in the market, like the one you're sending your friend, then you're chayv masa, right? And the ones that are received from someone, let's say you receive some from a chaver. Usually, you receive stuff from a chaver. Usually, you assume mice has been taken, right? Fruit that's received from Amaretz might be mice that is demai. And the lashon here, reilu chayovin, which Rav Azariah takes on, sound like apart from the fact that chayav ma'isa, that you have to take proper tevel vadai. It's not just demai. So who is this opinion? Rav Chia v'Shem Rav Yochanan. The words of Rav Azariah in our Mishnah, who hold the one who receives these saplings, like similar to the ones sold in the market, you have to treat them as proper tevel. This is Rabbi Yehuda, like the view of Rabbi Yehuda. The Tani came, we've learned, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, B'Shem Rav Azariah, Afa sheleach lechaverei atanin. If one sends olives, right, from the press where they put the olives to soften them, they should produce the oil, or shasalim, and these other young saplings, which are sold in the market, v'chavile tilton, your bundles of your fenugreek, yeah? Lo yochal, the receiver cannot eat it until he treats it as proper tevel, right? Because it's clear the mshaleach has not taken any maisa. Now usually, you cannot sell peiros, which is tevel. But these 3 minim, we say, yes, you know what? They were sent with them while it's tevel. These things were normally sent as tevel. So you have to assume when you receive it, it was tevel. Okay. A matana, a gift, is not kaveh l'masa, even gmar malacha. So why? You can't even eat it achilas, alright? So some say, he's cutting it to send to his friend. He's giving it chashivus, as a gift. Maybe he's very careful about it, and that's kaveh l'masa. Hashaleach l'chavera, you're sending it to your friend. Maybe that gives it some sort of importance here. Okay. Rav Shimon Lokeshon, he says, I feel a chaver, even a chaver who's believed on anything, sheshilach l'chaver, he's sending to another chaver from these 3 things, sarach la'asa, you should take masa. You assume the one who sent it never took masa, right? These minim, everyone sends them tevel or sells them tevel. Chavraya boy, but Yeshiva asks, Nicha, I understand Amaretz chashud. Amaretz, you never know. He might be over and send Paris not Besukah. But Chaver chashud, you think a Chaver, you don't trust a Chaver? He's very careful in dinim of Maasros. Rabbi Yossi, V'chi Amaretz gabi Truba lavka Chaveru. As far as Truma is concerned, even Amaretz is believed. So even if you're going to tell me talking about the one who's sending it is an Amaretz, why is it that one who receives it, these 3 things, you have to take Masa and and Truma. But we trust Amaretz with Truma anyway. Other things that the Amaretz sends, you don't separate Truma Gedola. Elakeni, this is the way to learn it. That these 3 things, you don't say take Masa first. Why not? Because people have a custom to send things in a state of tevel with these 3 things. There's no issur to send these minim when they're still tevel. Because the issur to sell tevel is to kanas chachamim. People won't realize, come to mechshol, and these 3 things, there's no reason to worry about it. And so he said, even if this person sends these 3 minim, he's a chaver, still the one who receives it has to take maaseh. Right? It's like when you imagine you send a plate of chocolates or something, and the plate's not been toveled. Right? They don't tovel the plate. And the one who receives it knows that the plate's not been toveled. Right? So when you start using it, that's when you have to tovel it. Okay? One who uproots these turnips from his own field and plants in his own field for seed, he has to take maaseh before he replants it. It is then that the seeds are not going to be chayv ma'aser in their own right, and you're going to remove the ma'asros now. There are other cases where these things are uprooted to plant elsewhere chayav b'ma'aser. There are cases where you are chayav, that the planting removes them. Let's see, lav shanya, there's no difference between whether you want to plant the seeds or the saplings, the zera, for seeds, which are not Chaim Maasrot, bein lehefka, or you want to just plant them, they should grow as hefka, and that's part of a Maasrot. Bein lechutz la'aretz, whether it's for abroad, you're going to plant these things abroad, and gedulei chutz la'aretz are part of a Maasrot. In all these cases, you have to take Maaseh on these things first, not to remove the Chiyuv Maasrot. Okay? Now, there's another Mishnah in the Chaim which goes against what we said about planting these things for Hefka. Tamantanin, on Impel we've learned, La'ailam, after it's been cut, who knows and you give a portion to the poor Mishum Peah, or part of it on Maasrot, you don't have to separate Maasrot, Adshi Mareach, until you stack it up. But notice that Mishum Hefka, you're allowed to be mafki your grain, and therefore the back with his hefka is potem in a maasrot adshi marech. Now what do you see? Before the gemar malacha, you're allowed to be mafki your tzavua. We don't worry about removing a maaser obligation. Here you're saying this, that you're not allowed to plant these things for hefka, even though it's not reached gemar malacha, because then they'll have no chiyuv maaser. So the gemara says tamam. In the case of peah, hu mafki al hakol. He makes hefka. He doesn't leave anything for himself in the portion which he's making hefka. But here, is planting these things for hefka, to my case, shu mafke ala gedulin. He's only mafke the future growth from these plants. He's not making hefka the main purpose, the main roots of these plants. So meikadin, the ikarim, the main parts, will carry on to be Chaim Maasrot. But since the growths will be, in the end, will be a majority on the main part, therefore the main part will be basel in all the future growth, and therefore there will also be potter from Maasrot. So the planting will cause to be mafkia the ikarim, the central bit from Maasrot, that will carry on, and therefore you have to take maaser before the natir. Now we learned that the Tosefta, if you want to sow these plants, shesilim outside Israel, you have to take maaser beforehand. As far as chutz la'aretz, there's no difference between the main part and all the rest. You can't just say the growths are potter from Maasrot because they grew abroad, but not the central bit. The central bit grew in Eretz Yisrael, and then you planted it abroad, so the central bit should also be potter from Maasrot. In chutz la'aretz, there's no difference between the central bit and the bits around, right? So it's the same. It's mistabel to say. Same thing with hefka. When you can't plant shesilim for hefka. It's even talking about a case where you're mafke everything. So the Sira comes back. If we're forbidding you from planting shesilim on hefka, the Mishnah and Pei allows you to make everything hefka. So the Gemara still says, here, in the situation you're planting the chutz la'aretz, there's no difference between the central part and the growths, right? The main ikka is also patur. But the Brisa forbids you to plant them in chutz la'aretz. But as far as the hefka, right, planting for hefka, the reason we gave before still stands. But the Brisa that forbids you to plant these shesilim for hefka is because you're mafke the gidulim. So there's no stira between the Brisa and the Mishnah in Peah. So what's his answer? There's no difference between the ikka ben the gidulin. Let's see what he says here. Yeah, even so, the Gemara still keeps the previous answer. The difference between the chutz la'aretz and the ikka ben gidulin. Okay. There's no issa to plant these young plants for hefka, if you're mafkir all the ikrim as well. But you shouldn't plant these shesilim chutz la'aretz without taking maaser. Even though the ikrim, the grew in Eretz Yisrael, they are potter for maaser. And it's a kanas chachamim that we put kanas on someone who plants shesilim from Eretz Yisrael in order to replant them in chutz la'aretz. Okay. Al da'atek. Now, the explanation that the Brisa forbids you to plant shesilim for hefka. Al da'atek Rish Lakish, do Amu who holds tevel botel barov, that tevel is botel in a majority of chulim, and a mixture is not chayv b'maasrot. Nicha, I understand the words of the Brisa. That if you want to make hefka only the new growths, without being mafkir the ikka, you have to take maaser on the sill before you replant it. Because after it grows, right, the ikka would be botel, right? And that's tevel with the rest of the gedulim, which is hefka, and it won't be Chaim Maasrot. and therefore the Ikka will remove its Chiyuv Maasros, it will fall away. Do you understand? The Ikka, which had a Maaseh obligation, will be nullified in everything else that grows. But according to view of Rav Yochanan, who holds Ein HaTevel Bata B'Rov, it remains Chai B'Maasros all the time. There's no reason to be Maaseh the Shasil before you plant, right? Before you replant it, even after the replanting, the new growth, so there'll be Rov. Doesn't matter. The Ikka will remain, and it's mixed with the new growth, so it'll be Chai Maasros. Therefore, Yantin, you can wait Al Sheg Yagdil until this Shasil grows. And then take Maaseh there if you could on the whole thing, like the whole mixture of Tevel and Chulin. Or maybe we could say, when are they arguing with Tevel Shenitzval Zah Torah? Something which is Chaim and Maasros Ben Torah, it's Gemar Malacha. Rav Yochanan holds Tevel Derai says not Bata B'Rov. Tevel Shenitzval Midivrein is Midrabanon, but it's not Gemar Malacha. Midrabanon is also Achilas Keva. Kol Amma Moedah, everyone agrees that Tevel Bata B'Rov. The Tevel is bottled in a majority. So just like these Shasilim that we're talking about, there's no Chiyuv Maaseh, only with Rabbanon. Because when they were planted, they're not reached Gemar Malacha. So according to everyone, the Chiyuv Maaseh, which was in the Ikka, is Bata B'Rov Gidulim, which is Hefka. You have to take Maaseh on the Shasil before you go and plant it the Hefka in order not to remove the Chiyuv Maaseh. Right, okay. Hasif. So everyone agrees that Tevel Rabbanon, which mixed up in Cholin, is Bata B'Rov. Hasib Rabbi Baba Cohen Kume, he asked before Rabbi Yossi, but Tanina we've learned Ki Yosef Bahan, similar to them, they say Mosik, these are olives that you cut off, which are Chayv Maaseh. Shenis Avim, they say Nikuf, that got mixed up with olives of Nikuf, which are Matalas Haniyim, basically, they're part of Maasros. In Veibatzir, that's grapes that the owner of the field cuts, which are Chaim Maasros, which got mixed up with Inbe Ololais, which are grapes of Matanas Aniyim, they're part of Maasros. Right? So the din is, you've got olives and grapes of Tevel, they're not Batal and Chulim, and you should rectify the whole thing. Most olives and grapes, are they not Tevel Midrabanon? I mean, usually they're for making oil. Right? Grapes are making wine. While they're still grapes, they're not Mish Gemar Malacha. So why is the Mishnah telling you all these things of Tevel mixed up with Chulin are not Bata B'Rov? It's only a Rabbanan din. Amram Kiyante, we explained the Mishnah, but Shemen Shel Zeisei Masik, should desire him Shemen Shel Zeisei Nikuf. So it's the oil of the proper grapes, right, which got mixed up with the oil of Zeisei Nikuf. Right, Zeisei Nikuf is the Matanas Haniyim one, which is part of a Maasros, So the Chiyuv oil got mixed up with the Potter oil. And also the wine of the Batzeh got mixed up with the wine of Ololais, which is already reached Gemar Malacha. So it's Tevel Min HaTorah, therefore it's not Bata B'Rov Chulin. Okay, one who uproots the turnips and then you plant it into your own, Lezera, then you're chayav before you replant it. Amrabana, Lo Shana, we only said you have to take Maaseh, Ela, Shel Lezera, you're planting it for the seed. Haim Loichal, if it's to plant in order to eat it, then Patur, you don't have to take Maaseh before you plant it, because you're going to take Maaseh after you eventually uproot it. Rav Chiyav Shem Rav Yochanan, and then he said, Lo Shan, there's no difference between Lezera and Loichal, whether you're going to sow it or you're going to eat it. Chaim, you have to take Maaseh before you sow it. Because in every situation, your uprooting it is considered like the Gemar Malacha for it. Now, Lechaira, it's only if you plant something Lezera, and they'll have no Maasros obligations in the future, then you can say the Akira is like a Goyren. So the Gemara explains the reason of Yochanan. He said the reason of Yochanan that if you replant it for eating, it's a Goyren now, because you're planting, the new planting, you're taking them min hasheni from Maaseh, let's say Maaseh Sheni, la'ani, min ha'ani la'sheni. So the planting will remove the Chiyuv Maaseh Sheni which you had, and it might bring about Maaseh Ani obligation, right? Let's say your Akira, year 2 you cut it, and it had Maaseh Sheni, and the final Akira was year 3, which is Maaseh Ani, or the other way around. The first Akira was in year 3, which is Maaseh Ani, and the final Akira was year 4, which is Maaseh Sheni. So to remove that removal of that Maaseh which it had at the time when you first uprooted it, the Chaim said you have to take Maaseh before you plant it again, like the type of Maaseh which was at that time. And what grows after that, you should take Maaseh according to the year where it was uprooted. But Salim Shishrishu, you have onions that are rooted in the attic, right? And the Taro Melatame. The Mishnah tells us these onions that are rooted from their own accord are like planted as far as Tumah Tahara. If they were Tameh, they become Tahor, right? The Tosefta brings down, as far as Tzilim Maasros, the Basanim are considered detached. So they remain with their Chazaka. So what grew there is part of a Maasros. And with Shemitah, there's no Issa Svichim here. Now, what's the din of Issa Tolesh on Shabbos? What about detaching the Tolesh, like detaching on Shabbos for these things? Rav Yochanan Shem Rav Yanai, Arema Shabbos Salim, you've got what do they call Arema? A bowl, a container, a bundle of, what do they call it? Arema Shabbos Salim, which a person puts in the attic, Beishrisha rooted, Tolesh Mehem B'Shabbos, someone who detaches it on Shabbos is potter from Chatos, if you made a mistake, because the owner in a Rosa Maasrot Daf, he didn't really want them to root at all. They're not considered mechuba at the time of rooting, even as far as the Isur Tolesh on Shabbos. Now Rav Yochanan holds, just like you don't want them to root, and that exempts them from Maasros and Shvius, it also helps to pater from the Isur Tolesh of detaching on Shabbos. And Rish Lakish wasn't sure. Amalei Rish Lakish, he said to Rav Yochanan, "Mai kafalt Shabbos gabe Maasros." Why are you comparing Shabbos and Maasros dinim? You know, the fact the owners doesn't want it to root, it might help to pater it from Maasros, okay? But there's no reason as far as the Isur Tolesh on Shabbos. What was that got to do with it? As far as Isur Shabbos, the fact is these things are rooted, and therefore one who detaches it is liable, right? The riot was Loitanina. We didn't learn the heter to be Tolesh on Shabbos. Only vegetables that are not yet rooted in the ground. Right, it says about if you put your lefes in the ground under the vines to guard it, and if some of the leaves were uncovered. You don't have to worry about kilaya kerem. It's not considered you're sowing your vegetables under the vine. You're allowed to do it during Shemitah. There's no problem. You're just putting something in the ground, right, to keep it moist. Yeah? There's no problem of Shemitah. If you already separated mice from these vegetables, they grow a bit more. You don't have to take mice on the extra growths. And you're allowed to take the leaves that are uncovered and remove the vegetables hidden in the ground, even on Shabbos. Now the word nitalin sounds like these things are not rooted in the ground. So it sounds, according to what you're saying, even if they're rooted, you'll be positive from detaching them. So why does Mishnah tell us the heter only in a case where they've not rooted? So Shlokish holds we cannot compare Shabbos to Maasros. As far as Maasros, they're considered Tulushim, detached. But as far as Shabbos, they're considered connected to the ground. Now the Tosefta brings down, they're considered Tulushim, both for Dinei Mamona, Maasros, and also for Shvius. Now, what does Rish Lakish agree to this Tosefta that is equating Shvius and Maasros? Harav Zira, Rebavo, Chami, come and see, Ma Oma, look at what Rish Lakish said. Lo Oma Ella, he only said, Mai Kafla Shabbos Gabe Maasros. What's the equating of Shabbos with Maasros? It sounds like Shvius Kafla. He agrees that Shvius have the same dinim as Maasros. That is, if he wanted the onions to root, there's a problem of Shvius. If he didn't want them to root, then there's no problem of Shvius. So as far as Maasros, it depends if he wants the rooting. So the same thing with growth of Shvius, right? What does he want the rooting? Now, well, there is an Amora that tells Reb Zeira that there's no chiddush in the words of Rish Lakish. That he agrees that there's no Issa Svichim. There's no chiddush in that. Because as far as Shvius is Pashut, they're considered detached. So Amr Miyashad Reb Zeira, the Dahidaruba, is this the biggest chiddush you have in Rish Lakish? That as far as Shvius, the growths are permitted. If Rish Lakish Tada would learn that there's this of detaching on Shabbos, but tell Yad Yechidi, a tiny bit of an onion, a handful, then I understand that as far as Shvius agrees it's considered detached. And there's a chiddush, even though there's no raya that you're against the rooting, but since there's no hachacha that you want it to root, therefore there's no isur svichim. But Rish Lakish was said about a rema. A rema is a big amount. So you have a proof that they are really interested in this rooting in the ground. So it's poshut that what? Sorry, it's the other way around. Basically, we've got a right, he's not interested in the rooting at all, so it's poshut, no, it's a svichim. So why do I have to tell you from the diakon, from the words of Rish Lakish? I'm going to know there's no svichim here. So the Gemara answers the brisa that we were talking about. It says, Hishrishu b'kupa. It brings the brisa actually, that you've got onions which are rooted in a box. Harein b'cheskasan, the maasrot will shvis. Whatever grows there is not chayav maasrot. Right? If it's shmita, there's no svichim. If they were tamei, they do not become tahor. They are considered detached in every aspect. Okay, how are we doing? Get to the halacha base, yeah. Hishrishu ba'aliyah, if they rooted in the attic, in the earth in the attic, what grows is not chayv maasrot. If it's shmita, it's not also because it's fichin. They're considered detached. They're not planted the way you sow things. The owner doesn't care. If they were tamei, then they do become tahor. Right? Even though it's not the way of sowing, and the owner doesn't want it to root. Now, what about these onions then that rooted in the attic? There seems to be a contradiction. Because on one hand we say, the ones that remain, b'cheskasan, they stay in their chazaka, from maasrot and shvius, they're considered detached. But as far as tumah is concerned, you say they remove their tumah status, as if they're still connected to the ground. So the Gemara answers, tumah and tahara, there's a special reason to consider them connected. Rabbi Yosef Shemobla, the Torah went extra far to explain cases of purity. That any type of sowing to the ground is mechuba to remove a tumah status. Maltam, what's the source for this? Because he says when the corpse of a sheret falls, which is tamek kozera zerua asher zarea, any sown thing which is sown taru, because it's mechuba, it doesn't receive tumah. All the extra wording zera zerua comes to tell you even a tiny sowing to the ground and already doesn't receive tumah. Now we bring the din of the Tosefta about onions that root in the attic. Tony will learn in the Tosefta, lo yid loish, you should not uproot these onions on Shabbos, right? Now we bring two gisais. Of avatalash, if you did uproot the onions that rooted in the attic, is to know Tani someone to say chayav, you're chayav chatos, because there's an Issa Torah. Is to know Tani someone to say mutter, you're allowed to do it. Now wait a minute. Such a big argument. Some say it's asma la Torah and some say it's permitted. Mandama asu. The one who says asu, mate. If one Torah would say asu midrabanan, and someone else said mate lechatchila, fair enough. Mandama chayav pato. One says chayav, another one says pato. I understand nicha. I get that. But to go to such an extreme, one holds chiyav chatzos and one holds mutter lechatchila. The Gemara explains what it means when it says chayav. The light socha, you have to say, when the Tana says chayav, he doesn't mean it normally. He means the loy mutter, that it's also basically. And machlokes is it lechatchila permitted or is it lechatchila also? So according to this, it comes out there's no Tana that supports Rish Lakish or holds this Chaim in our Torah. So Gemara says, but Rish Lakish Amar, he said the first Tana held chayav properly. Chaim in our Torah, like the Tana. There is some Tana who held like that. That was Rish Lakish's view. So according to Rish Lakish, the machlokes goes to one extreme to the other. Right? There's one who holds us min Torah, and one holds is completely mutter. Okay, there we are. To be continued, Rabbi Sai.